Racial Discrimination and Social Injustice, Toward Equity and Solidarity. 1. Introduction. Racial discrimination and social injustice are enduring challenges that persist in societies around the world, undermining the principles of equality, dignity, and human rights. Rooted in historical injustices and systemic biases, racial discrimination perpetuates disparities in education, employment, healthcare, and criminal justice. Addressing racial inequality requires a collective commitment to dismantling systemic barriers and promoting justice, equity, and inclusion for all. 2. Overview of the problem. Racial discrimination takes various forms, including institutional racism, interpersonal bias, and structural inequalities that disproportionately affect marginalized communities of color. Across the globe, racial and ethnic minorities face systemic barriers to opportunities and resources, resulting in disparities in income, housing, and access to essential services. Moreover, racial discrimination intersects with other forms of oppression, exacerbating inequalities for individuals facing multiple forms of marginalization based on race, gender, sexual orientation, or immigration status. 3. Deep dive into the problem. The legacy of colonialism, slavery, and segregation continues to shape contemporary patterns of racial discrimination and social injustice. Discriminatory practices such as racial profiling, police brutality, and mass incarceration disproportionately target Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color, perpetuating cycles of poverty, disenfranchisement, and trauma. Furthermore, systemic biases in institutions perpetuate racial disparities, limiting opportunities for advancement and perpetuating intergenerational inequality. 4. Impacts on society and individuals. Racial discrimination and social injustice have profound impacts on both individuals and society as a whole. Communities of color experience higher rates of poverty, unemployment, and poor health outcomes due to systemic barriers and structural inequalities. Moreover, racial discrimination erodes trust in institutions and undermines social cohesion, fueling tensions and divisions within society. The psychological toll of experiencing racism and discrimination can lead to stress, trauma, and mental health disorders, further exacerbating disparities in well-being and quality of life. 5. Solutions and strategies. Addressing racial discrimination requires comprehensive and intersectional approaches that challenge systemic biases and promote equity and justice for all individuals. This includes reforming discriminatory policies and practices in areas such as criminal justice, education, employment, and housing. Additionally, investing in community-led initiatives and moreover, amplifying the voices of marginalized communities and centering their experiences and perspectives in decision-making processes is essential for advancing racial justice and healing historical traumas. 6. Call to action. Confronting racial discrimination and social injustice is a moral imperative that demands collective action and solidarity. Individuals, communities, and institutions must actively work to dismantle racist structures, challenge implicit biases, and advocate for policies and practices that promote racial equity and inclusion. This includes supporting movements for racial justice, engaging in difficult conversations about race and privilege, and actively combating racism in all its forms. By standing in solidarity and working together, we can create a more just, equitable, and compassionate society, where all individuals are valued, respected, and empowered to thrive. 7. Conclusion. Racial discrimination and social injustice are deeply entrenched challenges that require sustained and concerted efforts to overcome. By acknowledging the legacy of racism, confronting systemic biases, and advocating for transformative change, we can build a future where racial equity and justice are realized for all. Let us commit to building a world where every individual, regardless of race or ethnicity, has the opportunity to live with dignity, freedom, and equality, and where the principles of justice and solidarity guide our collective actions and aspirations. Let's work together to combat racial discrimination and promote social justice. Subscribe to our channel to stay informed and engaged in our efforts. Share our content to raise awareness and foster dialogue about racial equity and solidarity. Together, we can build a more inclusive and equitable society for all.